Hoop Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hello, Hoop Heads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
It's also discipline from the fact that we make them get up early in the morning. We make them, if you really want to be there, guess what? You'll be there at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. You'll be there at 7 a.m. on a weekday morning during the summer when you don't have school. The kids that are on the fringe, they're not really into that. And guess what? You can tell really quickly. You can tell when the kids get there. Do they get there right on time? 5 minutes before? 10 minutes before? 15? And we all gauge that, and we go, that is what we're talking about. The kid that gets there 20 minutes before or half an hour before and is waiting for us, even if we don't get there on time, that's the kid we want because it's important to him.
Coach Scott Ruthsatz is in his 8th season as the Boys Varsity Head Coach at Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky. During his tenure at CovCath, Coach Ruthsatz has amassed 210 victories and won 2 state championships in 2014 and 2018. He coached both his son Nick in 2014 and his son Aiden in 2018 to state championships. Keep in mind that the state of Kentucky has no divisions and crowns only one state champ each year. Prior to being hired at Covington Catholic, Scott spent 3 seasons with legendary Hall of Fame coach Bob Hurley at St. Anthony High School in Jersey City, New Jersey. The team went 84-8 during his time there and won a national high school championship in 2011. Coach Ruthsatz has coached at the high school level since 1998, with the exception of the 2006-2007 season when he worked as an assistant at Heidelberg College. He has won over 80% of his games at Covington Catholic and has averaged 28.5 wins per season since taking over the program. If you're enjoying the Hoop Heads podcast, please jump over to Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Stitcher to leave us a 5-star rating and review. Those ratings help the show reach a wider audience and help us grow the game of basketball in a positive way. I would highly recommend taking down some notes as you listen to this episode with Coach Scott Ruthsatz from Covington Catholic High School in the state of Kentucky.
Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And tonight we are pleased to welcome to the podcast Scott Ruthsatz from Covington Catholic in Kentucky. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on tonight and dig into your playing career, your coaching career, and learn a little bit from you about how you go about handling your high school program. But let's start back when you were a kid and talk a little bit about how you got into the game when you were young and what it was that made you fall in love with the game of basketball.
Yeah, it started really freshman year of high school, and I played at Sandusky St. Mary's, and really small private school. But what happened was freshman year there were a couple of JV guys that must have got hurt, and I got an opportunity to kind of get moved up, and did really well. And for some reason, once you have that little success, you just kind of and I stayed there the rest of my freshman year. And it was funny because, coming up through the 7th and 8th grade, there were multiple guys that were better than me. I mean, on a starting lineup of 5, I was number 5. And all of a sudden, within a year or two, I'm bypassing them. And I think that just kind of lit the fire for me, is like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is, I play other sports, but basketball is going to be a something that I'm going to do whether I'm in that sport or not. And it gave me some success through high school.
So you said you passed a bunch of guys. What do you attribute to you passing those guys and that you passed?
Taking it so much more serious than other guys. I became friends, kind of going through, and this is when the AAU was not that big. We had an AAU team at Margaretta High School, And literally there had to be over 10 tryout days. I mean, it was for one tournament up at Cleveland State. And we literally had Jay Larinaga come from Bowling Green. Coach Larinaga would come to our little practice, and he would play. We had Gus Johnson from Huron that played at Ohio University the same time I played. We had a really nice group of guys, and I think just that experience, and again, I didn't play a ton. I wasn't a star at all on that team, but I think just that experience and having to practice against such better players than I would in a normal situation just made me much more competitive, where my friends, they didn't take that route. They kind of like the regular open gyms, and I was much more competitive. So I think it was just a culmination of me just kind of maturing and the competition level.
How do you think that the current AAU and summer circuit for basketball, how does that impact some of the things that you're doing now as a coach, or how would you compare it to what it was like when you were coming up and playing? Because I know that for me, I always tell people that we had, like, basically in Cleveland here, there was 2 AAU teams. There was like a West Side team that was my team, and then there was like a East Side and downtown team, and that was it. Like, nobody else was playing summer basketball in any kind of organized fashion except maybe in open gym or, in a team camp with their high school team. So how would you compare how you grew up in the game with how your kids that you're coaching now are growing up in the game?
Yeah, we had it really was, like you said, it was kind of non-existent. You lived in with open gyms, traveling around to different schools to get the best run, trying to play against older kids just to kind of get that, experience, to where it now is, boy, these AAU teams, they're so big, they're well financed, they travel all over the country, and we've had kids, at the top of the top AAU, and it really takes away, what it takes away is it takes away from the development when, especially for the kids that are on the fringe that are pretty good players and they're playing on some decent teams. I mean, you really got to be good to play on those good teams. And I think what it does is the way that the schedule is, we always say, like, we won't let, like, my kids play AAU till they get good enough, because I always use the story of it, like a kid goes, his dad, really wants him to get involved in AAU, and he's in 6th and 7th grade, 8th grade, and he goes off to a tournament, let's say in Louisville, and you go to yourself, okay, well, he just spent Friday, Saturday, Sunday there. They played 6 games. How many shots do you think he got in there? You kind of think about it, well, warm-ups, and, maybe he only shot 5 or 6 times in a game. I go, literally, my kids are getting thousands of shots in a day, and they're getting skill development a day. And I think that that's where the lost art of basketball is you have to put the time in, especially with the guys that we have. I mean, we don't have guys that are super athletic, and we don't have, guys that are, can break ankles, but we're that guy in the middle where you have to be extremely skilled, because that's the game that we play now, is an extremely skilled game. And I think, especially in Kentucky, we are much more open than most states about, like, after our season, we're allowed to instruct our kids. We're allowed to get them in the gym right away. And we don't do open gyms like we traditionally do. It's all skill development. It's high intensity skill development with that game element in there, just to make sure that, we're keeping them, progressing forward as much as possible.
So here's a question. How do you educate parents about the value of the system that you just described? Because I would imagine that the culture in other places revolves around, we're in the off season, I'm playing AU basketball, I'm playing in 5-6 tournaments, I'm traveling to different states and, doing all this other stuff. And yet you're providing something that is completely opposite, or at least different from what many people see as the current system. So how do you go about selling your, let's say, 7th, 8th, 9th grade players who are going to come up and be part of your program? How do you sell those people on this is what we need to be doing as opposed to playing, 5 or 6 games in a weekend as you described?
Well, I think part of it is as much as they want to, because most kids when they come up, they're dreaming just like we dreamed about playing Division I. And for some that happens. For my 2 sons who are really good players, but because of their size and maybe this or that, they're Division II players, which is perfectly fine. But I think it's just the point that they need to put time in the gym. Going and scoring points in different games does not make them necessarily better basketball players. And as quick as we want them to get recognized by a school or a certain coach or whatever, you can get written off just as quickly if you overdo yourself and you're in a situation where you get exposed and you're not good enough. So we always say, get so good that when you go out, you're going to be ready to go. And again, it dwindles down more so now than it did in our day, where, now you get kids that are freshmen and sophomores, verbally committing, which is absolutely crazy, even younger. Now it's like, unless you're a highly skilled player coming in, it's maybe somebody that can help us at the varsity level, we would probably say you need one more year. And I wouldn't even play AAU. I would just go in and get my skill development done every day, working on not only shooting, skill development, strength and conditioning, and footwork. Once we get those down, then you can go out and compete.
Yeah, I think if we could get that message to middle school players, high school players, and the parents of those players, I think the basketball world would be far better off. Because just what you described earlier in terms of going to a tournament and playing 5 or 6 games, and if you travel and the amount of time you're spending in the car and between games going to restaurants and hanging out in the hotel, and then how much basketball are you playing compared to the amount of basketball skill development you could do if you just stayed home and got yourself in the gym. And I think that that's something, as to your point, that's been lost in the game today. So if you think back to, again, when you were in high school and you're coming through, and you were talking a little bit about, the process of how your sons ended up playing Division II, and you have players that obviously the dream is for most kids, if they're serious about the game, they dream of playing Division I. So talk a little bit about your time in high school and describe the recruiting process for you, and then how you ultimately ended up making your decision to go to Kent State and then ended up finishing your career at the Division III level, and talk a little bit about how that all played together, because I think there's a lot of people that have misconceptions about both Division I basketball and Division III basketball, just in terms of the level of play at both of those different, at both of those different spots.
Yeah, and it really came up, that fire that was lit freshman year, getting that opportunity. Sophomore year came in, played mostly JV, but got some, got to dress and play a little bit on the varsity level. Then junior year is really kind of where I took off. And again, I just played really hard and, practiced a lot. And like you said, I tried to play against better players all the time. And we had a couple in our area. So, you'd always try to go with them to different, open gyms, and because that's kind of really how you were made back in those days. And then when I got to my senior year, obviously could have went to a bunch of different Division III schools. But my coach, Coach Dennis Faber, also went to Kent State. And he was in the late 60s, and I kind of just thought about it. My dream was always Division I, and I said, you know what, I'm just the personality that I am. I'm just like, you know what, I would hate to go Division III and dream of Division I. Let's just try it Division I. And so I started the process. A couple of my assistant coaches, Rick Dominic was one, was sending the films. If you remember the VHSs, they were sending those VHSs out left and right.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a different world now, but, finally we got, in some, and then Rick would kind of come back and he'd say, hey, you know what, maybe we should go take a look. So I looked at like John Carroll and, Capital and all, very Ohio Northern, very good Division III schools. But my dream was just always Division I. So I just kind of, pushed it to that level. We spoke many times with Coach Krug when he was an assistant, and Coach McDonald was still there. Went and visited a couple of times, and just kind of had an opportunity to get that walk-on spot. And I just took it, and it was probably looking back, it's just kind of my personality. I would rather go out there and go, boy, you know what, that just didn't work out, and then I can always go backwards a little bit, but. After that, kind of took a year off to kind of go through, some personal things with the family. My dad got diagnosed with some prostate cancer, so I just wasn't in the realm. I'm the baby of the family, so I kind of took it a little bit harder than the others. And then just got back into basketball by going to Heidelberg College in Tiffin, Ohio, and finishing my career out there, and it was just, with the anticipation, like, dude, I'm just going to be a good Division III player, be solid, and there's going to be a lot more out of life than just basketball, but hopefully I can take these experiences that I've had over the last 4 years and kind of move them forward.
I love what you said. First thing I want to touch on is the fact that you wanted to go and see if you could make it at the Division I level, because I think that that's something that, if I think back to my own time, that I really wanted to. I was probably in a very similar situation to you, in that I had a lot of Division III schools that wanted me, that I could have gone to, and I had some Division I interest, but not a tremendous amount. And I kept in my mind, I believed that I was a Division I player, and so I kept pushing, and kind of re-recruited myself to Kent. And, was fortunate enough, again, to be able to get a scholarship and be the 7th freshman in a class of 7. And it just happened to work out for me. But I always think that it's very, very difficult to fault a kid who's going through the recruiting process, who tries to go and play at the highest possible level. Because I think you made a great point that if you hadn't, you probably would always wonder, could I have made it there? And man, I wish I would have tried it. And the fact that you did go and you did try it and you did go through the process, at least you go back and now afterwards you don't have any regrets looking back that, I should have done that.
Right. And it was a great experience. And as tough as it was for me, to mentally kind of grasp some of the things we were doing, and even physically, I'm obviously, I think it was Coach Long was our strength coach. And, I've never lifted a weight in my life, and we're out there at the complex off campus there and doing our thing. And but what's funny is is the relationship that me and Coach Krug had later. He didn't look at me as like the little walk on that whatever. I mean, honestly, he was one of the first ones to call both after our state championships of 14 and 18 and congratulate me, because we had some conversations once I started getting into coaching, like, hey, can I grab some of your stuff, any of your drills, any of your stuff that you have? And he was by all means happy to give it to me, and that really helped. And like you said, without that relationship, without that experience, you kind of wonder, like, kind of where we would be, because I had that reference at least to get into the coaching world.
Yeah, the relationship piece of it is so important. And it's great to hear that, you had that relationship that you were able to build with Coach Krug in that 1 year that you were there. And it's always amazing to me. It's one of the things that we found as we started the podcast, is just how willing coaches are, this coaching fraternity that we have, that people are willing to share and talk and reach out and help one another to such a huge degree. And now, if you think about the time now versus 20 or 25 years ago, because of the internet, the ability to connect with people all over the country, it's just the network of coaches that you can build it's incredible to me.
Yep. No, there's no question. I mean, I've been fortunate to do some like clinics and stuff. with we did the Kentucky one, and there's Chris Mack before me, and I've known Chris. I mean, he's part of the reason I'm where I'm at Covington Catholic because of his relationship to the area, and obviously he was at Xavier. But it's amazing that you can contact these guys and get really good stuff. I mean, they are not trying to hide anything. There's no, like we talked about, there's no really original ideas anymore, but it's like you got different squads in the high school level, you got different talent levels, and you have to make sure that you're adapting your game to your talent level, and that's part of the high school coaches job, and you need to use these resources. So whether it's Coach Brannon at Northern Kentucky University, or Coach Steele, or Coach Mack, or Coach Calipari, or Coach Cronin, you can reach out to them and you can stop by practice and start picking their brain about stuff, which is insane for a high school coach.
Yeah, I mean, I just think guys are so willing to share, and the other thing too is that everything now with digital and with Huddle and Crossover and all these different platforms where it's so easy to share film. It's even if you wanted to keep stuff a secret, good luck with that. So I think it's gone the other way where everybody has just said, look, there's nothing that we're doing that we don't want to share with you. We're more than happy to talk to you and share it out, because again, you can find out if you want to do enough research and look, you can find just about anybody's stuff online that you want to find. So it's a different world than it would have been coaching 25, 30, 40 years ago for sure.
Sure.
So if you look back on your time in college as a player and you think about kind of your upbringing in the game, when did you know that you wanted to start coaching? Was that something that you knew from a young age? You're like, someday I want to be a coach? Or was that something that after you graduated and you started looking around, you're like, man, I still want to be involved in the game? What's my avenue to do that?
Yeah. What it was is there was a few guys, how you kind of idolize guys growing up that played at your high school. And, for me, that was the case. You idolize these guys, are good high school players. They go on to college, got good college careers, and then they come back to coaching. And it was kind of like, yeah, you know what? I think I can do that. I think I love the game enough. And I think that I can be I can relate to the kids enough, and I'm competitive, and I just love competition. And really it started right after college, where I came out and a good friend of mine, Aaron Roth, who played for the University of Findlay and was a coach at Macomb High School, and he started at Sandusky St. Mary's. He gets the head coach, and he needs help, just volunteer help. And there I go, just volunteering, just want to be around the guys. And I think it's, like you said, we talked earlier about the relationships. It's just those relationships with the kids, trying to make them a little bit better, today than they were yesterday. But for a long time, you get mixed signals from society because, one is, then me and my wife started our family, and before you know it, obviously teaching is not a very lucrative endeavor. So, most people are telling me, well, you can't coach, then you got to be a teacher. Teachers don't make any money, and and so you kind of buy in. So I kind of put it on the back burner after a few years out of college, put it on the back burner for probably a good 5-6 years, and never really thought much about it. We started growing our family. And, but there was always something inside of me that says, I want to go back. And I think it's the relationships. It's the relationships with your fellow coaches. It's the relationship with the kids. It's the competition of seeing success that they have, that they wouldn't otherwise have. And then it just became a situation where I went back to Heidelberg under Dwayne Sheldon and just asked, can I be a volunteer assistant? And he was like, like any coach, hell, yeah, I'll take a volunteer
who I don't have to pay. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And I'm driving probably at least 45 minutes one way to get to practices and games. But he was really good about it. He goes, dude, I definitely understand your situation, but I tried to go to everything. I went to Midnight Madness, back and forth to every game as much as I could. And I got a kind of a different perspective of the college of recruiting. I would go with them recruiting and different things and wait for kids afterwards, and kind of thought, well, maybe this is more my thing. And then it just came. I got the head coaching job at Sandusky St. Mary's that following year. Their coach had left, and it was kind of late in the year, so they needed to kind of scurry. And I was I kind of, had a name and probably was an easy hire. So, they gave me an opportunity. And, that's when it really spurred on of like going to Coach Grube and going to the limited resources I had at the time of really trying to put my identity on a program as the head coach. And, but during that process, it was kind of like one of those things where it's kind of like, hey, I'm going to be good here if I go 18-5 every year. I'll be good. But there was something that was, just not. I wasn't okay with that, and that's when I kind of saw it outside of the box and really kind of thought about college.
So, as a first-year coach, there, when you get that job coming off being a volunteer, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in that first year going in? Or were there things that, maybe you didn't expect that ended up happening? Were there things that when you went in, you were like, oh, I know I got to get this going in order for us to be successful? Kind of how did you approach that first opportunity to be a head coach and have your own program?
Yep. So my first baseline foundational thing was, we are going to outwork everybody. Just play really hard. If you play really hard, good things happen. The rest of it, I got to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing. And I had zero. I knew that I had some, decent players that had I had one kid he was a senior and he had played since he's a freshman. So it's nice to have that kid. He kind of knows the ropes. I had some nice other little pieces, but I got to be honest, in the beginning, I had no idea of what to do. But the baseline foundational thing was play really hard. And, getting them to play hard just meant, just sacrificing yourself for the betterment of the team. We're going to take charges. We're going to get on the loose balls. You're right. We're going to be so aggressive that, it's going to be hopefully intimidating. And the rest of it, I got to kind of learn as I'm going, because even though I sold myself, I'll be honest with you, I didn't really have a good grasp of what was going on, kind of like what I have now.
What were some of the things that now that as you look back on that time in your career that you were like, holy cow, what was I doing?
Yeah, you know what it is? It's getting kids comfortable to play within a system, but play with freedom, and having knowing enough about when teams change up defenses on you. If you were to mainly play man, but all of a sudden play a 1-3-1. Back in the day, I would pretend like we're running something. And because I probably wouldn't have put anything in, but now, we have, and again, it's not a ton, but it's one or two sets that you can run against any odd front, any even front. It doesn't matter, So those are just baseline things where you go, we'll never be caught off guard like a deer in headlights like we were then, because they're very simple things that I've learned over the process of my coaching career of putting them in. And it doesn't matter if it's a odd front or an even front. Here's what we're running, and we just run it.
So so you said that you're there at your alma mater and you're coaching, and something about it gave you an itch to leave there and do something else. So can you talk a little bit about what that was gnawing at you, maybe that made you think that you needed to go and pursue a different opportunity in coaching? And then what was the opportunity that you then pursued?
Yeah. So, there was just something lacking in the fact that I could be fine, and I wouldn't even say being mediocre, being good. There was just something about me, and kind of goes back to that, going to the Division I route and coming back, and I'm going to try it. I'm going to push the limits and see what happens as far as I can take myself. There was something lacking. I want to say part of it was the fact that I had no idea how to coach. I had seen my, predecessors, guys I worked under coach, and you take notes and stuff, but I really never grasped it myself of like really how to coach. And that is what I was lacking. I could have figured it out over time, but time was of the essence. Like at the time, I'm 35 years oldish. Because I've only been away from home for 10 years now. So I had to expedite this process of coaching, particularly when me and my wife would sit around at night. And at this time, we have 5 children. And we're sitting around going, I keep saying to her, I said, I love this coaching thing, but I really think I'd like to go the college route. I really think that that's something I think I can go in, maybe as a video coordinator or something like that. I know it's a young man's game, but I think I can get in there. I got a decent enough personality. I get a quick sense with the kids of how they're doing. I think I can make this work. And I can remember us sitting down and go, well, let's give ourselves a 2-hour radius. And, this is how the conversation started, and 2-hour radius. And we're like, okay, so I went through remember back in the Street and Smiths,
oh, yeah,
every year, the old Street and Smiths. And so you'd go down and I would just pick out like, well, hey, they're within the 2-mile radius. They're within the 2-hour radius. And I would write letters to every single coach. And eventually we bounced it out because I just wasn't hearing back from anybody. And I just wanted to learn. I just wanted to, absorb as much as I can about who are the best coaches, how can I learn. So finally, as I'm doing this process, and some of them I hear back from, So now we're going out several hours. We're not just in the hour or 2-hour radius. So I get a callback from Craig Robinson, who was at Northwestern and just got the Brown University job out in Providence. And he was similar to me. He, obviously he played, but then he got away from the game. He got into the business world. And for me, it was our family business that I got into. He got into banking, was the vice president of a bank in Chicago. And something, in his story was similar to mine, where it just didn't click. He got back into basketball. He got the head coaching job at Brown. So he contacts me just as, hey, Scott, I got your stuff. We did have a position available, but just want to let you know we just recently filled it. And I was pretty honest with him. It was August. I'm like, well, the kids are going back to school. I couldn't really make it work anyway, but I appreciate it. Hey, by the way, would you mind if I come out and visit you? Now, I don't know who Coach Robinson is really at this point until you get to about 2007 and 8, where, now Barack Obama's becoming a major, player on the presidential scene, and Craig Robinson's, sister happens to be Michelle Obama. So I fly out there, and in that conference, the Ivy League, they play on Friday and Saturday nights, so they have a travel schedule. So you go out, and I saw like Columbia and Cornell or somebody like that. So, but for 2 days, we sat around talking with all the coaching staff. They were fantastic. And I just picked their brains. I go, this is I think I want to get to the college level. What do I need to do? And they go, the best thing you can do is these camps. They got summer camps that are great, and you really need to work these camps. So he made a list of camps for me, and the one was the Hoop Group camp up in the Pocono Mountains, and the one that he featured was the Coach Bob Hurley camp, that they ran twice a year. And I go, you know what, I'm in. So I called around, Coach Hurley's staff, who kind of put the directors of his camp, and just say, hey, do you need any coaches? Because I'd love to be one. And this is all prior. I'm still coaching at St. Mary's at the time, or going into my first year there. And I go out and work his camp. I take my son, Nick, my oldest son, and we have a great time. I mean, the players that you were around, and just, you could, like, the aura of Coach and everybody out there. John Carroll was there, and John Carroll was the Duquesne head coach. Then he coached for the Boston Celtics for a while. I mean, just the people you would sit around at, like, the dinner table overhearing their conversation. I go, I'm in the right spot. So what I did was I followed up with the athletic director at St. Anthony's that whole next year. So while I'm coaching, I'm following up with him. I'm doing my own thing as best I can, but I'm really following up with that. They end up being national champs that year. And had a tremendous amount of talent come out of St. Anthony's in that particular year. Some I got to coach, and as I said earlier, we're going around and we're dividing up teams. And like I said, I'm such a rookie, I don't even know what's going on. Well, we count off by number, and here's my group of, let's say 8 guys. I got number 8 out of 10 teams. Here's my 8 guys. I'm going around, and like I said, I'm asking for their names in here. And then Kyrie Irving, what last name? How do you spell your last name? And I'm it's like funny now, but it's like, here's Kyrie.
That's a good draft, Scott.
That's a good draft, and it's all by happenstance. It was and so you go out and you go, like, these are the guys I was coaching before they were, like, stars. And I can't even remember some of the other names, but I'm sure they had successful careers. But that was the environment I was craving, and that was where I wanted to be. And so even though, I had a pretty successful year by what it would be at Sandusky St. Mary's standards, I knew I wanted to be in that realm. I wanted to be the best of the best, coaching these guys that were going to big time schools and really trying to get the best out of these kids. And that's why, a year goes by and I reach back out to Coach Hurley. I drive out there. I meet with him face to face. I said, if there's any opportunity, I'd love to have it. And again, still 5 kids at home and my wife. And before you know it, he calls back on a Monday and he says, hey, we got an opening. Would you like it? And I said, absolutely. And that was how we got to St. Anthony's out in Jersey City.
So I want to make sure I understand the timeline and exactly what you had going. So while you were at St. Mary's for that year, you're working in your family business at that time, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So then the discussion with your wife is I'm going to leave the family business and my at least paying job for a job that is at a school in a whole totally different part of the country. Explain what that conversation was like and just how you guys came to make it work. Because I know one of the things that coaches is always a struggle is the time balance between how much time you're dedicating to your craft as a coach and how much time you're dedicating to your family. And the best coaches are able to do it well by kind of incorporating it all together into one. And I know we'll talk about that with your sons as we move forward here. But at that moment in time, can you talk a little bit about how that family dynamic / work dynamic / coach dynamic all fit together?
Yeah, so I mean, it really started with those conversations, and I think my wife Jessie just being so like she must have saw something, and we never really talked about it, but she must have saw something internally of how much this means to me. I mean, the family business was great and everything, but there was something that is lacking in life, and for anybody that's experienced things like, just coming home frustrated from kind of knowing things like you just came home frustrated. Many times, you might be short with, your wife or your children, and you're just not giving them a fair shake because you're just not completely happy. And, a lot of times we just kind of go with it. But, there was something, she's a very strong woman, and she was able to kind of see inside and go, you know what, I'm willing to go on this journey with you. And, because at the end of the day, we always thought, going back to that Ken experience, like we're going to go for it all. and it may or may not be there, but I don't want to look back. It's going to be too late when I'm 40 and we want to do this, because now, now they're in high school, they got certain friendships, and it's very hard to move a kid. So, we really talked a lot about that, and she just took the leap of faith with me. And, and she was fantastic, because, it's easy for me to move to that realm because I'm going to be busy all the time. I'm going to be coaching and traveling, and, I'll have engagement through the school because I was a teacher at St. Anthony's as well. And here's my wife living in a totally different environment, the melting pot of the United States out there in Jersey. And, and we have nobody. We have no friends. We have no family. And that was the hardest part, is kind of thinking what she was in it, and she just made it work. And I think in the end, as we see our kids grow, especially the older ones that remember the experience, it made them so much more independent and so much more outgoing, and just, really, I think it really got them outside of their comfort zone. And, that was part of the experience too. It got me outside of my comfort zone, because I could have easily just stayed at St. Mary's, but it gets you outside of that, and it just exposes new experiences. And, and with her support, we made it work.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, Alan Stein Jr.
Hello, Hoop Heads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
So was that your first time teaching in the classroom when you went to St. Anthony's?
Yeah, so that was my first time. I had taught one class at Sandusky St. Mary's, having a master's degree. They wanted me to coach like this AP economics class. So I went in there for one class. But all day long, that was my first experience in the classroom. And let me tell you, it was quite an experience, because if you know the history of St. Anthony's, it's now closed. But I started out my career teaching there outside of in a trailer that they had outside of school. So you talk about, not only you're dealing with, typically inner city kids that you've never really had to deal with, maybe one or two, but not a whole school of them. It was trial by fire. It really was. And it's one of those experiences where you just gotta, like I always say to our kids, you got to put your big boy pants on, and you have to just go out and make this situation work. Whatever you need to do, you have to go outside of your abilities and just make this situation work. And, fortunately for me, I had enough support around me, and just, I put myself on an island, and I had to make sure that this experience worked for our family.
Yeah, so that's really, I think, something that is interesting that you were able to go in and you were able to start teaching, and obviously work for a legendary Hall of Fame coach in Coach Hurley. And can you talk a little bit about what that was like, and what were some of the things that you learned from him while you were there at St. Anthony's that then you've taken since you've gotten to Covington Catholic and really been able to help you grow as a coach during your time when you were there as an assistant?
Yeah, it was an absolutely outstanding experience. Coach was, for his mystique of, all his teams and players, and obviously he's world renowned, and obviously one of the best, basically coaches of the sport. He was so down to earth. You call him today, he answers his phone. If he doesn't get you, he calls right back. And it was just one of those experiences where he never kind of like, he always was in teaching mode, whether he was teaching out the players, that we had, or teaching us coaches how to do certain things. It was the most outstanding experience, that I could imagine. I mean, it's everything and more that we had hoped for. So, kind of a little bit different than the Ken experience where, you kind of go and you hope for something and maybe it just wasn't there. You just kind of go to the fact, well, it just didn't work. This one really worked. And really it was how hard you need to work as a coach to make sure you put your kids in the best situation for success. And if, a lot of our, St. Anthony is known for having great players, so you think back in the day of, Bobby and Terry DeHare and Jerry Walker and, you got guys, I'm trying to think of some other guys back in the day, but they were just outstanding players. But it's like, those were just that was a really special year. The majority of his kids are Jersey City kids or Newark kids that come and looking for, this fatherly figure that's going to push them to their absolute limits and trying to give them a chance to use basketball as a vehicle to better their lives by getting out of the city, seeing different parts of the world or country, and just giving them better experiences. And that's what he did. And he worked so hard at it. I can't tell you, to what degree, because typically he has a lot of assistant coaches, there was 4 of us, and how hard he'd work, just dripping sweat after every practice. And I'm sitting there and I'm not doing really much, right? I'm kind of just watching. And I can remember going home several days and just like collapsing on the couch, just going myself, oh my, and I'm not even doing anything. And it's like, this guy works so hard to make these kids and give these kids a great experience, I think is really rubbed off on me because people that, would say how I am. And I'm similar to that. I want to have the greatest experience of their life. And I don't have these type of great athletes and things that you have, but you're still going for the same thing. You're going to give these kids a great experience and trying to give them opportunities, with basketball that gives them other opportunities outside of basketball down the road.
So obviously he was working extremely hard on the practice floor within the basketball side of his coaching job. But can you talk a little bit about what made him special off the court as well, in terms of, I think that's one of the things that gets lost in sort of the general public's perception of what a high school basketball coach has to do. We can all kind of see the product that goes out there on the floor, and that's kind of what people think of when they think of coaching. But You and I both know that there's a lot more that goes into any program success, especially when it comes to working hard. I would say it's, of all the things that you have to do, it's probably easiest to work hard during the 2-hour practice. What's hard is to do the hard work outside of the practice floor and the game, the game time situations. So can you talk a little bit about what Coach Hurley did around his program that made him so special and caused him to have the success that he did?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was established really quickly was the fact that, people would draw up plays or sideline out of bounds or baseline. He listened to everybody, even though the stature of where he was, he listened to everybody. I mean, he would get a coach going, hey, at one of his camps, we ran this or we have this drill. And he would say, well, write it up for me, draw it up for me. And he would look at it and he'd take it and he'd fold it and put it in his pocket. I mean, he was the most, you wouldn't even know his success, based on his personality, because he was personable to everybody. And that was, he ran Jersey City. It wasn't just St. Anthony's. He ran Jersey City. So you would go out to dinner with him, and the amount of people that, from all walks of life would, come up and say something to him was outstanding. So you kind of get a sense like, yeah, I see him for the most part on the basketball floor, but obviously he has a huge impact in the ability, in the community. And that really, to me, was huge because at this point in time, when I had a chance to get to know him, he's retired. He's done his bit. He's retired now. So, to keep that going was really special. And I think he's just so personable. He really, like I said, even for somebody like me who he doesn't really know, I'm not from Jersey City. I'm not from there. He treated me like anybody else. Like, I'm going to teach you these different things. We're going to talk through things. I want you to experience these things. And, he allowed us to go to camps with him. And he'd be like, hey, Scott, you open, let's say the last week of June. And I'd be like, well, I think, Coach. He goes, well, I'm doing a camp in Boston, and I'd like you to go if possible. And I mean, it was like the who's who of like working a camp. I'm with Coach Hurley, Danny Hurley, Bobby Hurley, working a camp in Boston. I go, like, am I dreaming? But I think he knew that us young coaches, this is how you need to teach them. It's by drills. It's by, making sure that you're communicating effectively with the kids, getting a grasp of their, of the different, it's much different now than it was 10 years ago, just with, the social media and things that the kids got to deal with. And, he just wanted to make sure that we were so well-rounded and that basketball was only one component, that we needed to be great people. When people call you, you call them back, right? You don't big time anybody. And you do all that in the framework of working really hard. You're going to have some success, hopefully, down the road.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is sort of, that great coaches have in common, and what you're finding in any coach that's had success is that they're willing to help everybody along the way, and they don't put themselves above anyone else. And if someone reaches out to them, or one of their players needs help, or an assistant coach, wants to go and become a head coach, they're willing to help them prepare for that opportunity. And I think that if you're going to have success, that it's important for you to bring other people with you. And I think that's what you're describing there with Coach Hurley, that it wasn't about him strutting around and being Coach Bob Hurley. It was about him putting other people in position to be, again, a servant leader, where he was willing to help those that were, coming along for the ride with him. And I think that's where he was probably had his greatest success. Forget about the success on the basketball court, but just all the people's lives that he was able to touch through what he was able to do there at St. Anthony's.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for me is I think he knew how much we sacrificed. I mean, consider that, picking up, a family of 7 at the time and moving them to a totally different, like, he kind of understood, like, hey, this guy's sacrificing a lot. Like, I'm going to give him everything I can to hopefully, down the road to make him, the best coach he can possibly be. And he did that for all of us too. And, that's what you really appreciate about him, is just how upfront he was and personable he was, because obviously at that point in life, he kind of doesn't really need to. And, but it was so appreciated.
So after your 3 years there, then immediately do you have the opportunity then to go to Covington Catholic, or when you left St. Anthony's, how did that go down?
Yeah, so in 2011, I had applied to other schools, and I had even, kind of approached Coach about, Danny had just went from St. Benedict's Prep to Wagner College. And I had got to know Danny pretty well through the camps that we worked and all kinds of other things, and, times he would be around. And I said, you know what? This is my chance. This is my chance to go to college right here. Danny needs assistance. You know, he's small Wagner College. He needs some assistance. So I remember calling Coach up and go, hey, Coach, you know, this is after our second year. Hey, Coach, you know, I know, Dan, you know, what do you think about me maybe approaching Danny about, you know, if there's any spots available at Wagner? And he kind of thought a minute, and this is all on the phone. He goes, hey, he goes, Scott, you know, he goes, I don't really think with your family situation that that's such a good idea. He goes, if you're really, you know, hell-bent on going to the college level, I'll put in a call right now to Danny. He goes, but with your children, the ages they are, and, you know, you're going to be out recruiting, you're going to be gone a lot of times from your family. He goes, I just probably would not think it would be a great fit for your family. And that's all he needed to say. And it kind of just turned my whole total attitude to even like now is just like, you know, we added 2 more, so we have 7. It's just like that opportunity. It's like, nope, this is where I'm meant to be. I'm meant to be, you know, sleep in my bed every night, put my kids to bed every night. This is part of, you know, who I am. And it really took him to kind of grasp that and see my situation and go, yeah, you know what? That's great. If you're really into that, you can do it. But I'm just telling you that your best situation is at the high school level. So the way I got to Covington Catholic was after, so I kind of let it go. So we have 1 more year, and obviously we win the national championship. We beat Michael Kidd-Gilchrist in the state semifinal from St. Pat's. And we go on to win the national title, his last one in 2011. After that, obviously, my stock's high, or at least I think it is. I mean, I can put national championship assistant coach. That looks pretty good to most
Nice.
programs. So I'm going to myself, well, hey, you know what? I'm going to let's look to go back home. Okay, so we look to go back home. I'm looking at the OHSAA website, and there's lots of jobs opening and this and that. And I see Covington Catholic, and I go, and I look on a map. I see it's right across the river from Cincinnati. So immediately I call up Coach Mack, and I go, well, I know you live in Northern Kentucky, and he's out recruiting Kyle Anderson, who's a junior at the time. And I said, what do you know about, you know, Covington Catholic? He says, not a lot. And I go, what do you know about the area? I mean, is it a good place? I got 6 kids right now, and, you know, my wife she's ready to kind of move back into some Midwestern, you know, town. She likes a little bit of, you know, not as much as you know, what's going on here in the city. And he's like, it's a great place to raise a family. He goes, it's a fantastic place to raise a family. But let me give you to a good friend of mine, Joe Frederick. Joe Frederick played at the University of Notre Dame in the late 80s, early 90s. He was behind the shirt, you know, Catholics versus convicts type thing that I found out later. But anyway, so he gives me him. He's got a son there, and he's got a son that's graduating. And he goes, and I said, you know, I'm really trying to look for a program where I can build it up that has, you know, kids that are disciplined, kids that work really hard, and it's kind of a Christian Brothers Academy, which in New Jersey, it's down on the shore. We had trouble with them every year. As athletic as we were, they were so disciplined and so like physically ready to play us every year. Every year was a grind. I go, that's the type of program I want to form, something that's really disciplined, and the kids are really, really a tough group of kids, you know, tough environment. And he said, I think you can. And so I applied. Funny story is, though, I apply and kind of forget about it. Didn't really think. We had just won the national championship, so we're doing our parade of tours, Kissin' Baby tour, and Joe calls up and said, hey, did you get a call back yet for an interview? I go, no, I haven't. He goes, did you have Coach Hurley call yet? I go, no, I haven't. He goes, you know what? You need to do that. They're already interviewing. I go, oh, okay, all right. So in the meantime, I'm contacting Coach, say, hey, Coach, can you call this number? This is a job I'm really interested in. I think it's a good fit for me. In the process, I get a rejection letter from Covington Catholic that says, you know, basically, hey, thank you for applying, but even though you weren't selected as a finalist, good luck with your coaching future. And I'm like, what the what? So coach calls. The next day I get a phone call from the principal and says, hey, can we do a phone interview? I said, no, I'll meet you in person. So I drive to Kentucky, 11 hours, and I interview. I drive back, that night. And Coach Mack calls, said, hey, I heard it really went well. I said, yeah, I haven't heard anything from him. And, next thing I know, I get the job and go back home. Me and my wife sit down and we kind of talk about everything. And, and it looks like, this is a great opportunity for us. And there we go.
All right. So now you're starting your own program after having had a considerable amount more of experience. So you go in and obviously you're still going with your tenet of we're going to play hard and that's going to be what we're going to hang our hat on. What else did you need to do going into a new program? What were some of the things that, maybe from where the program had been the year before you got there, what were the things that you needed to establish right off the bat to make sure that you got the program headed in the right direction?
Yep, and it started with the culture of discipline. I had done, I came in, I had no assistant coaches. I don't have anybody here that I knew. So I had to rely on people to give me, hey, this is a good guy. This is, so I fill all the different positions because honestly, there was nobody left when I came. Every level had left. So you had to clear shop and you had to hire your own guys. But before I did that, because Kentucky is the way it is, I was able to come in and 1st of June and just do my own workouts. And really, those were the Coach Hurley workouts of just the culture had to be so tough-minded of playing really hard, we would play no out of bounds. The stands are in. You have to go get and it just had to weed out guys that just weren't, my kind of guys, just not guys that were going to grind it out. And that happened for the first couple of weeks. And then I had to go back to take care of some moving things and stuff like that. But in the process, I had hired some really good guys. My freshman coach is still with me. My main assistant is now my athletic director. Joe Frederick is now my main assistant, who I spoke about earlier. And Matt Oddie, who I had hired as the JV coach, I had moved him on to his own varsity program 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now. So, it just came down to all the stuff Coach Hurley taught us about, how hard to work, never, take mediocrity to any level, hold them accountable, be disciplined. And really, at that point in time, I had already formed a notebook of all the different, whether it was drills, plays, different things that I just studied, like studying for your ACT exam. I mean, I studied those things every day. And just to make sure when things would come up, I wouldn't have to look at a book. It just was there. And I studied that really hard. And just kind of try to put my blueprint on it. And coming in, we had nobody with varsity experience. The only 3 seniors that we would have were all JV players as juniors, and I was returning 2 points a game. And had no idea about the environment, had no idea of kind of what, Cincinnati area basketball was about. I knew what the Midwest was as far as Sandusky, and I knew what the East Coast was, which was nuts. I knew what that was, but I said, well, who is the absolute best program around here that I can go learn a little bit from right off the bat? And it was Archbishop Moeller High School and Carl Kramer. And so I called him up right away and took him out to dinner, sat down with him and his assistant coaches, and just tell me about your program. Tell me what you do. Tell me how you do it, and on and on and on. And so we've had a really good relationship. We play each other every year, and obviously they were the Division I state champs last year. And, so I got an idea of what it takes we just didn't have the personnel that very first year. And so that was kind of the mindset that I had was, we'll get there eventually once we got to get these our guys in an environment where they are really serious competitors with a better skill level than we have.
So what did you learn from that? What did you learn from that conversation with Coach Kramer?
It was just about how disciplined he was. He was kind of the same way. Like he wasn't really much different than like my anticipation of just being really disciplined. He was disciplined to a fault, and he was very, very, very well organized because he was St. Anthony's was an inner city school with an inner city budget. Moeller is kind of a suburban school with inner city kids playing there, but a suburban budget. And what he was able to do with camps, the amount of camps he had, and I mimicked every single camp he had. The program or the media guide he had was first class. Everything about it was first class, from their uniforms to their travel suits, for everything. Their travel, they would travel to Florida. We were like, wow, we only thought at St. Anthony we got to go there just because they paid for it, these guys were doing fundraisers in order to afford their kids to go and kind of have those experiences. And I said, that's what we need to do as well.
Yeah, I think by adopting that sort of first-class mentality right from the start, I'm sure that put you ahead of the game of where, you might have been if you had tried to, sort of gradually build into that. But I think jumping in right away and saying, look, this is how we're going to do things, and we're going to do it in a first-class way, by getting that started right off the bat, I think you ended up probably getting to the level of success that you've reached probably faster. One of the things that you keep mentioning is discipline. So can you tell me, Scott, what's your definition when you talk about your team as disciplined? In your mind, what does that term discipline mean when it comes to your team?
It's really just, it's on a couple of different levels. One is like play. So when you're playing, be very disciplined to, your ability. We call it like stay in your lane. Like there's, you see some teams play and you're going, what is that kid? He's not capable of doing that. Like, so why is he? I have very little toleration for guys that can't do certain things. I'm not saying they eventually won't get there, but at this moment, if you're not a very good shooter, why are you shooting the ball, right? You haven't put enough time in. Be disciplined. Don't do that. Like pass it, give it off to somebody that can shoot. And we've had those, teams in the past being very disciplined defensively. If there's one thing, if you're a mediocre player as far as like skill level, the one thing you can always do defensively is no scouting report, know who can do what, all the little things. And those are just discipline things. Those are just things when you're in there, it's like instead of daydreaming, it's just, here's where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. I'm understanding every single opponent's role on the team, what they can do, and we make it pretty easy for them at the high school level. Most good high school teams, they have two guys that can beat you. Two guys that we star every game. Really good team might have three. But outside of that, the fourth best and the fifth best cannot beat you if you give them more and more opportunities to score. The good players can always beat you. The kid that's averaging 20 can go for 40. The kid that averages 8, he can't get 25 and beat you. He can't, because he's not used to having that many opportunities and kind of being the man. So we teach about discipline and understanding the roles of, our opponents and what their role is on their team. And it's also discipline from the fact that we make them get up early in the morning. We make them, if you really want to be there, guess what? You'll be there at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. You'll be there at 7 a.m. on a weekday morning during the summer when you don't have school. The kids that are on the fringe, they're not really into that. And guess what? You can tell really quickly. You can tell when the kids get there. Do they get there right on time, 5 minutes before, 10 minutes before, 15? And we all gauge that, and we go, that is what we're talking about. The kid that gets there 20 minutes before or half an hour before and is waiting for us, even if we don't get there on time, that's the kid we want because it's important to him.
So how do you go about instilling that in the program? Is that something that just day to day is talked about, reiterated, explained, shown, or is that something that you do specifically, like you address, like, look, we want you, if you're supposed to be here at 7, we want you, we love it when you're here at 10 to 7, or we love it when you're here at 6:45, or is it just sort of implied by the way you go about doing things?
It's more implied than anything else because the really good players we've had over the years have always instilled in that. So, if we talk about last year's team, so for the first time in school history, they're in the USA Today top 25. We're 35-4 for the year. We beat 4 state champions, Moeller being one. We beat two down in Florida. Actually lost to one, won to the other, and beat another one in Indiana. And the guys that really were the catalyst for that were C.J. Frederick, who's now at Iowa, and my son Aiden, who's now at Christian Brothers. And what it was is just the amount of time they would put in from going before school to shoot to going, after school to shoot. And like we say, every team in America practices 2 hours a day. Every team in America. What are you doing outside of practice to make yourself better? And these guys literally would go, to practice. The freshmen would practice after us. They'd go home and eat and say, hey, let's go back and play a little bit of full court one-on-one for a half an hour at 8 o'clock tonight. And that's just the way that it was. So you got to get the kids that love it versus the kids that, kind of love it if you're going to have a program that can win at a higher level. Now, you're still going to have those kids that just kind of like it and are just good high school players. We have those too. But you got to have a couple of kids that absolutely love it and will do anything for the team, in order to get their success to another level.
All right, so I got to ask you this, Scott. You're right across the river from Ohio, where in the summertime they get 10 days of contact. How jealous are your counterparts in Ohio with the access that you're able to have to your kids there in Kentucky?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, and it's funny because you get the coaches from some of the GCL schools, that Greater Cincinnati League, coming over and participating in our open gyms because we're instructing, like we're in them. We're like it's just not letting roll the balls out. We're really into them. So but I know for a fact that they're absolutely again, trying to figure that out. But, that's one of the things that you got to take advantage of because we play a really tough schedule and we don't always have the greatest of players. So you got to convince them that through hard work and just being in the gym and repetition can kind of get you on a higher plane than if you don't.
All right, so let's jump into you coaching your sons and winning a state title with each of your 2 older sons on the team. First of all, talk about the challenges of having your sons on the team and just some of the things that you have to navigate that you don't have to navigate with a normal, ordinary player. And then 2, talk about just the joy of coaching your own kids, and especially when you have the type of success that you were able to have in both of your state championship years.
Yeah, so there was different experiences with each son. So Nick was my oldest, and Nick went freshman year to St. Anthony's. And so he goes to St. Anthony's. Obviously, it's a totally different environment of anywhere he's ever went to school. And, he's playing with obviously some super athletes and some really good competitors. So he goes in and he gets moved up to JV. So he's playing at the JV level. And his counterpart right now is actually playing at UConn, Taryn Smith, who is, I don't know if he starts or not, but Taryn is a fifth-year transfer for Danny at UConn. That was Nick's backcourt mate at St. Anthony's freshman year. They both got moved up to JV. They're both playing JV ball. And Nick was just an extreme competitor. He was a really good competitor. We get up and move here. And literally from his sophomore year, he has to be the man. He has to be the absolute man. I mean, I'm making him pick up full court, and I'm making him have to score. And and that first year was really, really hard because I expected a lot out of a sophomore, really a lot. And we end up going 17-14 that very first year when people said you won't win more than 6 or 7 games. Surprised a lot of people. And what it was is the next year, it was kind of like you could see improvements, but he just, we still need him to kind of do more than, kind of the normal kid. And again, I'm was kind of really into Nick because I'm kind of looking at the St. Anthony blueprint and going, I don't, this, he's just not good enough for this, where I need him to be. And then it was about halfway through his junior year where I remember us having a pretty candid conversation about, you just have to let me do my thing, Dad. Do my thing. And I said, okay, I'm going to let you do your thing, kind of, sarcastically speaking, after a loss or something. And we ended up 27-7 and 2 points away from, the state tournament. So kind of surprised everybody. We went from 17-14 to 27-7. And so now it goes into his senior year. So now we're kind of, okay, he's having a decent year. He commits to the University of Findlay before the year, so he gets that out of the way. But I remember in the preseason going, I don't know how we're going to score. We'll be all right, but we're not going to be, I don't think we'll be as good as last year. And it was just something about when he took over the leadership portion of the team, and he just kind of went off. And it was one of the, in 3 years, he almost scored 2,000 points. He was the state tournament MVP. He averaged about, I think it was around 20 to 25-ish, through the state tournament. And he just kind of set the tone for just mental and physical, really more mental toughness of how you can just will something to happen. And that's what he did. He absolutely willed our wins in that senior year. And then, then he goes on to the University of Findlay and it's, he has a great high school career, and, he goes on to Findlay, which is a really good Division II, and he's, competes there and, didn't have quite the success he probably had wished, but, we all don't have, those experiences. But for us, he was a great player, and he changed the culture of everybody kind of wanted to be Nick then. And then with Aiden, it was a totally different situation. Aiden's personality was much different, much more low key. But we also had, kids like C.J. Frederick, who went to Iowa. 6'4", wing player, could shoot it, could put it on the deck. He didn't need to be the best player. We had, Jake Walter, a 7-footer, going to Xavier. We had A.J. Mayer, who will be the starting quarterback at Miami of Ohio next year. 6'3", just an absolute monster. We have Michael Mayer, who we still have, even though he's injured. He's a tight end, 6'6", 235 pounds, committed to the University of Notre Dame as a tight end. We had guys, and he just had to go within the system and just be a really good player. But in big games, he showed up. And a lot of that I attribute to Nick and kind of him coaching behind the scenes.
Yeah. So what were the challenges that you faced in terms of coaching your sons, either with maybe players in the locker room, with parents? Was there any issues? And obviously both of your sons were very good players, which helps, I think, that situation to go smoothly. But were there any challenges that you came across in terms of coaching your own kids? Anything that you might give advice to other coaches who might be thinking about having the opportunity to coach their own kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think, coaching your own kids is difficult just because of the fact that you're kind of micromanaging, always their play, as opposed to other kids where they probably get away with a little bit more. And I would say with Nick, I would suggest that hopefully if you're coaching your own kid that they're really good so there are no complaints. But in Nick's case, that was the case. He was just that much better than everybody else, on our team at least, to where that wasn't an issue. With Aiden, yeah, there was an issue, especially when it came to his sophomore and junior year, where there were certain, parents and things like that questioning, why are we playing him? Why are we doing this and that and the other thing? But, what I think the general public doesn't know about coaches' sons is, it gets taken home a lot more than most normal kids. Most normal kids aren't being, coached, like I'm sitting on my couch right now and we're watching a game and we're talking about what, is going on in the game. I mean, that just doesn't happen with most, fathers and their sons. And I think that, you got to make sure that they're really good players, fundamentally sound, and again, if they're in the event, and I have two more sons coming up, in the event that they're not good enough, you can't be blinded by the fact that they're your sons and this or that. If they're not having the ability to help you be successful, then they have to take a back seat to whoever can help you win games.
All right, one final question for you before we wrap it up. And again, it relates to your sons. As they were growing up in the game of basketball, so let's go back to when they were 7, 8, 9 years old. Can you give advice to parents of kids that age who are into basketball? How much did you push them into the game in terms of, okay, we're going to go and get shots up, versus say, hey, do you want to go get shots up? And then they made the choice to go ahead and do that themselves. So I guess the question is, how much did the push to become really good basketball players come from you, and how much of it did it come from them? And obviously they had more opportunities probably in basketball than other sports simply because of your involvement with it. But how would you describe that situation in terms of you pushing them?
Yeah, I think like with Nick's situation, it was one of those where when we moved to Jersey, it was such a hotbed of basketball. Like, he just wanted to be a part of it. Like, and so he was willing to learn, just do whatever it took to kind of learn and just compete, where it was much different with Aiden and how we did that. And my suggestion for parents these days, and I have a son that's a 6th grader and a 2nd grader, is, don't make it that important. The success of the kid is going to depend on, I've never seen kids more stressed out today. And even my own kid, Nolan, who's a 6th grader, he's a really good competitor. But there's also this thing, he gets to this stage of whining and almost to the point of crying in certain situations. And it's just why are you doing that? One, you haven't put enough work in to do that. Two, that's just not the way. It's not that important at the 6th grade level. Go and play hard and have fun with it. And, it'll come when it'll come. But I think a lot of parents try to force the action and force things to happen because, they're around other players that are better athletes. just better players, and they're trying to replicate that, and it's just not a healthy situation. And I've seen more parents like get on their kid, and I'm just like, you need to relax and just let the kid will eventually figure it out. You have to give them parameters where they can be successful. And those parameters are especially like for my kids, I just say, give me 20 minutes a day. That's all I need from you right now, Nolan and Aaron, second grade, whatever. And I need 20 minutes a day. What does that 20 minutes? We have a little hoop outside. Go and get 20 minutes a day. Set a timer. That's all I need. If it's too cold to go outside, go down in the basement in the part that's cement and go dribble for about 20 minutes. That's all I need. Nothing overboard, nothing too, and you just have to make it fun, because eventually you see that the kids start to burn out, and they burn out very easily, and you just don't want to create that environment.
That's a great answer, Scott. I couldn't have said it any better myself. I think you really hit on a great piece of advice there, that if parents are out there listening, that hopefully they'll take it to heart and understand that ultimately we want to provide opportunities for the kids, and we want to make sure that we make the game fun. And if they're really going to be great at it, eventually it's going to come from their inner drive and not from any external push from mom or dad or uncle or grandma or anybody else. So let's wrap up here by having you share your contact information with people if they want to reach out to you after listening to the podcast. And then if there's anything that we didn't touch on that you want to share before we get out of here, go ahead and do that now. Thanks.
No, absolutely. I mean, anybody can contact me. I'll give you two modes. I'll give you my cell number, which is area code 201-655-1870. Feel free to text at any time, call, whatever. I'm more than happy to share any of my experience. Or you can also reach out to me at Scott, S-C-O-T-T, Ruthsatz, RUTHSATZ at gmail.com. Again, I'm always willing and happy to help in any way I possibly can.
Scott, we can't thank you enough for spending an hour or so with us tonight on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to get a chance to pick your brain and talk to you a little bit about all the unique experiences that you've had in the game of basketball. So we, again, thank you very much for coming on. And to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Hello, Hoop Heads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
Head Start Basketball's Player Development Academy offers Cleveland area players a unique opportunity to improve their basketball skills. Regardless of a player's age, skill level, or position, training with Head Start Basketball will elevate your game to the next level. Do you want to improve your ball handling, become a better shooter, or develop into a more skilled, confident player? Our Academy classes offer training that's designed to do just that. Our training sessions are innovative and will have you learning skills that are transferable to actual games. We have 4 different class skill levels for boys and girls, ages 4 and up. All Player Development Academy classes will be held at the Strongsville Recreation Center. For more information or to get registered, please visit www.headstartbasketball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.